Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Sheereen Zulkefly and I am a clinical psychologist and a senior lecturer for the Department of Psychiatry, Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences, UPM. So today I would like to share with you my topic on the danger of dwelling and its role in attachment and depression of college students. Right. So there's a lot of studies that have shown or emphasized the link between dangerous dwelling and psychological distress, particularly depression. And college students are among one of the most vulnerable groups that are prone to develop psychological distress, because of all the transitions that they go through, all the additional responsibilities that they have to go or they recently have during the university years, makes them more vulnerable to experience disturbances or psychological disturbances. Past research has shown that dangerous dwelling, also known as rumination, is one of the biggest predictors of psychological distress. So dwelling is something that I think everybody goes through. It's actually it's a negative emotion coping style that involves self-reflection and probably elaboration of repetitive, and you focus on your negative emotions. Like when there's a bad event that happens to us, we tend to kind of replay that bad event until we manage to cope with our negative emotions. But dwelling becomes dangerous when we negatively obsess about that stressful situation consistently until we get so distraught and we're unable to resolve our emotions. Yeah. So dangerous dwelling or rumination has been found to exacerbate the symptoms of depression. Like some of the examples of dangerous dwellings are, I can't do it, I'm not worthy, I wasn't good enough, nobody loves me, that's why the same thing keeps happening to me and all that. Yeah. So these are all examples of dangerous dwelling. So besides rumination, attachment orientations of an adult has been found to influence the development of psychological distress. Those individuals with insecure attachment, basically anxious attachment and avoidant attachment, were found to be prone to be more vulnerable to ruminative tendencies, which is to obsessively think about negative emotions, as well as psychological distress such as depression, anxiety, and stress. Okay? So although there's a lot of research on rumination, attachment orientations, and depressions in the West, not much is known on the link between these three key variables among college students in a local context. Right? So this study aims to examine rumination and its role on attachment orientations, which is avoidance and anxious attachment, and depression of college students. Okay. So the present study was conducted in UPM, where 530 students were selected using multi-stage cluster sampling technique. Data was collected using self-administered questionnaires and were later analyzed using structural equation modeling. So this is the sample characteristics of the present study. The respondents were between 18 to 33 years old and had a mean age of 22. A majority of them were females and were Malay. So for the measurement utilized in the present study, for attachment orientation, the experiences in close relationships revised general short form Malay was utilized. This scale had a total of 14 items, 10 items measuring anxious attachment and 4 items measuring avoidant attachment. For rumination, the ruminative response scale short form was utilized and there were 10 items. And for depression, the Counseling Center Assessment of Psychological Symptoms Malay, which was used, and this scale actually had 62 items, but and contained 8 subscales. But for this present study, only one subscale, which was depression, was utilized. So that particular subscale had 13 items. Okay, so this is the hypothesized model for the present study. It is hypothesized that rumination would act as a mediator between anxious attachment, avoidance attachment to depression. Moving on to the results, it was found that the college students in the present study had a somewhat moderate level of avoidance and anxious attachment, as well as a moderate level of rumination tendency and depression level. It was also found that all the key study variables were correlated positively in the expected directions, and their level of correlation were between low to moderate. Okay, so the structural model analysis results showed that the model had a good fit to the data. However, there was one path that was found to be insignificant, and that was the path between avoidant attachment to rumination. Right? Okay. As a discussion, rumination was found to have a significant relationship only with anxious attachment and not with avoidant attachment. So this was in contrast to past findings where both attachment relationships were linked to diminished ability to deal with emotional difficulties. Those with anxious attachment had a more hyperactivating strategies to cope with distress, meaning that they had a more hypervigilant attitude and they were more aware or had a more intense experience of all the negative emotions going on in their lives. So that's why they tend to ruminate more, right? But those with avoidant attachment, they're prone to rejecting emotion-related thoughts, and they avoid all emotion-related action tendencies altogether. So individuals with avoidant attachment have greater levels of emotional distancing and suppression of feelings and coping strategies than those with anxiety attachment. So results also found that rumination had direct and positive relationship to depression. This result further supported past research in which highlighted the strong influence of rumination on the development of psychological distress in individuals. So attachment orientations were found to have a direct positive relationship to depression. This was consistent with recent studies that emphasize insecure attachment orientation as being significant predictors to psychological distress, such as depression and anxiety. Those with insecure attachment would have a negative view of themselves and the world based on their mental schema, shaped by their past experiences with their parents mostly. So these insecure individuals will have less effective emotion regulation strategies. They have lack of problem-solving skills and do not seek support in stressful situations. The findings emphasize that dangerous dwelling increases and prolongs the symptoms of depression by heightening negative thinking, impeding effective problem solving, and hindering helpful behavior, as well as harming social support. And also the study found that the strong influence of insecure attachment orientation, which is high anxious and high avoidance, in increasing the risk of developing depression. This study is not without limitations. Self-report biasness, as information is solely based on respondents' responses, so future studies may want to consider using multiple informants. It is cross-sectional and correlational design, and it hinders drawing causal links between the key study variables. And lastly, sample of students is just from one local university, which decreases the chances of results being generalized beyond the sample of college students. As a conclusion, rumination due to some extent influenced attachment and depression. Young adults with anxious attachment were more at risk of dangerous dwelling, which could further aggravate the development of depression. Insecure attachment is a strong predictor to development of rumination. Those with negative self-view of self and others are more prone to ruminative tendencies, where they are persistently thinking about negative, stressful situation without being able to cope emotionally well. Therefore, prevention and intervention programs should incorporate resolving the habits of dangerous dwelling in helping youngsters to prevent depression. Thank you.